So I wanted to start kind of at the beginning. You've taught in so many different arenas, including serving as a congregational rabbi at Temple Beth Hillel. You started teaching here at JCHS in 2008. What is special about teaching JCHS students? What's different?
Well, I would say what is special for me about teaching JCHS students, and especially I would say in a couple of the areas that I've been working in, which is the Modern Jewish History course, JUMO, that's required for all juniors, and leading the Israel trip for many years, is I get to be part of students discovering their Jewish identity. Who are they Jewishly? And I would say that one of my personal goals throughout my time here is helping students find their authentic Jewish identity. Being Jewish is more than a religious practice. So we have students that run the gamut, and no matter where they are on that spectrum, I want them to find their authentic Jewish identity, and I want them to find a language that enables them to express it, and I want them to feel good about it. And that to me is a rare privilege, to be able to be part of that process. You know, when I was a kid, I grew up in the Bay Area. There were no Jewish day schools when I was a kid. The idea that there was a place where you could go and explore Jewish knowledge, both religiously and academically, was unimaginable. And it's a real treat. It's a gift that kids have this space. And it's not just in the classroom, right? It's on the journeys, it's on the Shabbaton, it's on all the spontaneous interactions between students and their teachers or students and staff, where they get to explore these things.
I've talked with some students too, and it seems like they really appreciate the way that you keep discussions open. So as you might imagine, they really enjoy your forthrightness, and that you're comfortable allowing them to express what they feel are their views, maybe even get into productive arguments, but that it still feels safe. They also really love the wide-ranging perspective that you bring and you share with them to help them see things in a new light. I know that they're going to take a lot from what they've learned from you on their journey. What will you take from your teaching of these students, from your interactions with them?
So the first thing that comes to mind is a quote from Pirkei Avot. I'm going to do a lousy paraphrase in English, but more or less it's, as much as I've learned from my teachers, I've learned more from my students. And what I really like about students here is, at least in my classes, they're not afraid to ask really challenging questions. And I try to be explicit with my students that I have biases, I have a point of view, I try to keep them in check as much as I can. If they disagree with me, to raise it, and they have the courage to do that. So I get challenged a lot in my classes, and I find that really fun because I'm an old guy, and what I think I get most from my students is they keep me open-minded, right? I don't live in a world where I have a few close friends and a few family members and we're all more or less in agreement and we reinforce the same old stale ideas. The kids force me to look at issues, whether it's a political issue, whether it's looking at an aspect of Jewish history, whether it's thinking again about a personal choice they might make or I might make. So that's one thing that I've really gotten from my students is I feel like my brain stays open and flexible. The other thing that my students have taught me is how to be kind. Like, it's easy to teach good students. That doesn't take any work. The challenge is to teach students who are struggling. And I kind of feel like if I can just find the key, then the door opens and suddenly all these wonderful things become possible for students. So I always feel like the students, what they teach me is that each one of them is special, brilliant in their own way. And my challenge is to find out how to get that brilliance to blossom. And you've got to connect to them as human beings, as individuals, not as students, not as teenagers. I mean, they are teenagers and they are students, and that brings its own stuff with it. So keeping an open mind, trying to look at things with fresh eyes, and really seeing each one of them as the amazing human being they are becoming.
Well, I was going to say, it seems, though, that you always come from this perspective of wanting the growth to happen for the students. So it's not just, oh, you did a bad thing, but let's talk this out. What happened here? How did this happen? And how are we going to move forward?
So there's lots of talk in educational circles now about restorative justice. And it's a great idea. Moving away from a strict discipline model to a growth model, and a resolution model that takes into the account the needs of all the parties involved, the person who did the harm and the person who was harmed. And we've been doing that here for years. We didn't call it restorative justice. We call it tshuva, repentance or return in Hebrew. And we followed the Maimonidean model, which really has 4 steps. One is recognize you've done something wrong, feel remorse, make amends to rectify the harm you've done, and then don't repeat the offense again. So we've been practicing restorative justice, but from a Jewish perspective, using a 1,000, 1,500-year-old form that's completely compatible with current thinking in academic circles. So I think that's one of the things JCHS does really well, where we actually bring Jewish values to life. They're not just something we study in the classroom, they're something we model and we live.
So having been here for 13 years, and I remember when you first began teaching here, in what ways have you seen JCHS grow?
Well, this is jargon, but our institutional capacity or our educational capacity is so much richer than it was when I first started here, and I still feel like a new hire. Our capacity to support students, for example, our educational support department has grown both in number and in the quality of our staff and in the continuity that we have there. And we have so many qualified educational support people that can help students navigate that. That's phenomenal. School is not separate from the rest of students' lives, and we have a great capacity to help support a student. I will illustrate with an anecdote. We had a junior transfer. All junior transfers become my advisees by definition. And he had left his past school because of some academic issues. And my first question was, how are you feeling? Which was, he told me when he graduated, the last question he expected, how he was feeling rather than how he was doing. And I think our capacity to focus in on the whole student keeps getting stronger. And when there's continuity in the teaching staff, when there's increased capacity for educational support, for emotional support, it just works better for the students. And I think the student experience gets better and richer all the time.
Is there something special, you think, about the way that teachers are at JCHS? Like not every teacher, I think, would be comfortable teaching in our style. Is there something that's special about the teachers that are here?
Yeah, they're all great educators. I think all of our teachers, if they don't come here with a desire to teach the whole student, to engage with the student in their totality as a learner, as somebody with emotional needs, as somebody with a life outside of school, they learn it by being part of the faculty here. They learn how to cultivate a growth mindset. They learn how to not take things personally and be student focused. They learn how to be objective in their evaluation of the students. Like, one of the things I love about this school is whenever a teacher writes an evaluation, that evaluation has to be based on data, on work turned in, on participation in class, not on some attempt to try to psychoanalyze a student or get inside their head. And we have a teaching culture here, a student-focused, growth-oriented teaching culture, and I think we do a good job, I'm going to use this word, so as indoctrinating our faculty into that mindset and that value system, so there's a consistency across the board.
If you were talking to new teachers, you have such a great relationship with students, and I think you're able to lean into that. What advice would you give them starting out, especially here at JCHS?
Well, I'd give them two pieces of advice that might seem contradictory, but they're both linked. The first one is to have firm boundaries. Our students are still, they're teenagers, and teenagers are still kids, and they're still in formation. And when a student knows where the boundaries are, they're much more likely to thrive. Like, we want them to color within the lines. And as long as they're within the boundaries, they can pretty much do whatever they want. If they cross the boundary, and I just talked about that in terms of our restorative justice model, we have to bring them back. But to not have a boundary is really problematic for students. And the second part is build trust. If our students know we care about them as people, as individual human beings, they will do just about anything we ask them to in the service of their learning and their growth. So I think the essential precondition for a successful learning relationship is trust. Build the trust, only good things will follow. And the kids will follow you where you want to go. So that would be my advice.
So I'm just thinking, throughout the time that you've been here at JCHS, you've been so committed to helping each and every student find a relationship with Israel, one that's authentic to them. You teach Jew in the modern world, you lead them through reflections on Israel, you literally lead them through Israel. What are some of the aspects of that that make that work so important?
First of all, I love Israel. I think Israel is a miraculous thing, not in the religious sense of an unnatural event created by divine intervention, but miraculous in the sense that it has changed the historical condition of the Jewish people in incredibly positive ways. And here now, 70-some years after the establishment of the State of Israel, the situation of the Jewish people in the world is so much stronger, healthier than it ever has been. This is something that if in 1945, after the Holocaust, with the destruction of the Yiddish culture that was so important, you had said the Jewish people are going to have an unimaginable renaissance, most people would think you're crazy. But it happened, and it happened because of the establishment of the State of Israel. So what excites me, that's a little taste. As an educator, though, I think it is important to teach kids that Israel is a real country with real people and real problems, because they will leave the confines of their synagogues, their homes, and their high school, JCHS, but it's important to teach our students the full story, both the miracle of Israel's establishment and its incredible positive impact on the Jewish people, and the suffering that's been inflicted on the Palestinians. Because if we don't, and we don't teach it here, they'll be exposed to it in a much less sympathetic, way and in a way where they can't explore it. So the stakes are really high, which is why it's important to not be propagandists, but be educators who teach a really complicated subject in a really nuanced way. And I am confident that if we do that, in 90%, 95% of the cases, we're going to cultivate a strong, nuanced connection to Israel that's going to stand the test of time, which is what we need.
What do you hope your legacy will be after teaching here at JCHS? What do you hope you'll be remembered for?
Oh, well, I can't really answer that question.
Sure you can.
Well, I hope I'll be remembered as somebody who was honest, forthright, good-humored, down-to-earth, and cared deeply, deeply about the students who spend their 4 years at this school and the school itself. That'd be okay.
As always, it is such a pleasure to have a chance to talk with you. You bring so much insight and so much wisdom to all the things that you do here. So thank you for sitting down with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for giving me the chance to spout off a little bit.
Anytime.
Okay, great.